Hi, camera. How you doing today? What's up? We are? That's scary. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are watching, I would just like you to know that we got together an hour before airtime to actually make sure that everything was working properly. And Vince messed it up. So he is currently patching wires together frantically in the background, hoping that he will become part of the show shortly. So we'll see what happens next. He assures me there will be an edited version posted later for those of you who don't find this kind of crap funny. What, they can't hear you? Are we really live? You're messing with me, right? Oh well, no, that's okay. Well, hurry up and join the show because I don't have any material prepared. I'm supposed to be just the guy who provides color. I'm not supposed to be doing the show. He has no audio, ladies and gentlemen. But you might be able to hear him feeding back through my microphone. I'm not really sure what you can and can't hear. So we'll just sit here and stare at each other until something interesting happens. Gosh dang. Should be all of the testing should have been done before airtime. Should not be in this situation right now.
Okay. Woo! We did it! Now they can hear me.
Was there a point in that?
Of course, to show how being prepared is a good idea.
What is their video right now? It's just me full screen?
Yep. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Open Source Tonight, the show where technical difficulties are guaranteed by law to be included at least once an episode, or your money back. Not really.
What money?
Exactly. What?
There's money involved with this?
No.
You need to talk.
We need to
You never said anything about any money.
Oh no, the viewers have to pay to watch the show, Anyway, let me make everything sound good. Now,
I'm not worried about the way it sounds. I just don't want to be the only thing on the screen.
Oh, well, you're not right now. I'm on the screen.
Oh, okay. I can't see what's on the screen. You're going to send me back the feed, or I just don't know.
Yeah, I can't send you the feed today. Remember, I had to swap the cable so I could use the Mac.
Oh, so I have no idea what's going on. Lovely. I love it.
Yeah, I need to buy another cable, apparently. I thought I had two. Anyway, don't mind me.
For the one of a cable.
It was a Type-C cable. I was using it to power my Raspberry Pi to do the Wi-Fi, but it also is supposed to take the video from the switcher to you.
Do you understand what he's saying? I don't know what he's saying.
Probably nobody does, but that's the good news. If you understand, come over to the studio. I need some help anyway.
Too late.
All right, let's add some compressing.
Besides, in your super secret location, they'll never find you.
It's super secret.
It's deeper than the Bat Cave, boys and girls.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
All right, let's see here.
NORAD is jealous.
All right. I actually would love to have a studio underground, so let's do it.
My luck, it would flood.
Well, it probably would, but I mean, until it flooded, it would be great. All right. So, folks, we have a show. We have a Joe Collins. My levels are quite. Hold on. Let's bring my levels up. Bring my levels up. There we go. Okay. I think we have a show. So, Joe,
audio,
are you ready?
Audio. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing.
I wonder if you're doing some testing or if I'm doing some testing.
Look, we did this last week, so we wouldn't have to do it this week. So I don't understand why we're doing it. What are we supposed to be talking about?
Bash. And we're about to actually start the show part of the show. So, folks.
The Born Again Shell, ladies and gentlemen.
The Born Again Shell.
The command line interpreter.
Yep.
The beating heart of Linux.
Michael says, hi, lurking. And
hi,
Trevor says, good evening. So, welcome to the show. And Tesla Tower says, LOL, got here a little early. Well, don't worry. The show
No,
started a
we're
little late.
a little late. You're on time.
That comment came in yesterday.
For our stupidity.
That comment came in yesterday on the stream.
Actually, it's all Vince's fault. I had nothing to do with it.
By
the way, maybe we ought to introduce ourselves and tell people who we are.
That's a great idea. Maybe I should start recording the show part of the show too, though.
Oh, is there something else that you forgot to push a button on?
Well, did you expect...
Do we have to start over again?
Well, first I'm adjusting the white balance on the camera. Bear with me, everybody. Now the white balance looks good.
Anybody's going to notice?
I will. Okay. I think we can start a show. So everybody, fasten your seatbelts and all that fun stuff. And we're going to talk about Bash. Leave your comments in the chat. We'll answer a few towards the end of the show. Okay, let's fade to black for the edit. All right, here we go. And as always, I'll introduce. So we'll cut Joe's audio. Here we go. 5, 4, 3, 2. Welcome to Open Source Tonight episode. Insert the number here. I probably should have checked that number ahead of time, but we don't need to know what number we're on. Today we're going to be talking with Joe Collins, and the Bash Born Again Shell is our topic. Let's bring Joe right on into the show. How you doing today, Joe?
Greetings and salutations, boys and girls. How are you?
How am I, or how is the audience?
No, the audience.
Oh, okay.
They can comment back, they can say.
That's true. Anyway, hopefully everybody's doing well, and we have opened our video feed to you today. We're going to be talking about Bash. So, Joe, what exactly is Bash? I have a feeling you might know.
Yes, I do know exactly what Bash is. It is the default shell in most Linux distributions, so that when you bring up a terminal emulator, isn't that a cool word? When you bring it up, it actually, that's what you're working in, is Bash. It is the part of it is a program that interacts directly with the kernel. And it's called the shell because it wraps around the kernel and allows you to use humanly readable commands and syntax to speak to the computer or other programs running on the computer. That's what it does.
Oh, okay. So it's a shell.
Like he doesn't know this stuff.
I'm out of focus. Hold on.
There. So picky.
Oh, hold on. Still out of focus. I noticed my shot needed adjustments. This episode is going to be the bloopers one. Anyway, yeah, of course I know what the Bash shell is.
So far.
It is. I know what the Bash shell is, though, because, it's Bash. Everybody knows what Bash is, except for the people that don't. And the people that don't, Thanks for coming. But what Bash is a shell. And I personally really like that shell because, well, I started on it. I mean, let's be honest. You're biased to whatever you get used to after a while, right, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely. People ask me all the time why I don't do videos about things like fish and ZSH and all the other different shells out there. And the reason is real simple. Number one, I teach Bash to other people. And so therefore, I don't want to get confused trying to teach something to somebody else. Let's keep it simple, stupid, because when you sit down in front of a computer, the first thing that you're probably going to get is Bash in any Linux distribution. Now, if you find yourself reaching a level of proficiency where you want to try these other different things, knock yourself out. Have a good time. That's above my pay grade. Yeah, so I'm very partial to Bash.
For me, I've used Bash, but I have used Fish on Mac OS before. That's their default one now. Realistically, I still like Bash. I'm a Bash guy. But anyway, today we're going to be talking a little bit about different things you can do with Bash, including but not limited to a little bit of some of the interesting things that you could build with it that I've done. I've built a few scripts as of Joe over the years that would do some things that, hey, we needed to do. And who knew this Bash shell with the right little bit of code in a Bash script can actually do what we need.
Well, it's like I said before you started hitting the official record button. Bash is literally the beating heart of Linux. And there are those who want to come to Linux and have a point-and-click experience, and there's nothing wrong with that. But before you start going off about how it is archaic to have to sit down and type something into the computer to get it to do something, keep this in mind. If your computer breaks and you need help and you come to a more experienced Linux user, or you talk to somebody in a forum trying to get an answer to your problem, chances are what they're going to do is tell you to open up your terminal and type in a command to either print some information they need, or they will give you commands that will help your problem. So even if you don't want to use it on a regular basis, you should still at least have a nodding acquaintance with it. That way you can actually function in that environment when you need to.
Well said. And again, I mean, realistically, it's Linux. There's going to be a certain amount of terminal use. There's distros
terminal
that
use
don't.
in Windows.
That's true, but especially when you're talking.
The other day, I was looking up something on Windows 10 that I was trying to figure out, and I went to look up online how to do it, and the first thing they said was open the command prompt, and just find command and put this in. So I did what it said, and it worked. So those who want to say, well, when you're talking about Windows being completely point and click, it's not. Now, I can't speak to Mac because I don't use it.
It's close. And I mean, Mac OS is too. Most of the things that I've done in Mac and Windows, I can do without having to exit a GUI. And I mean, to be fair, you can do a lot of things in Linux that way too. But like you were saying, when somebody wants support, it's a lot easier to just say, look, Bob, open up your terminal, type in sudo apt install Vincent will fix the computer package v1.
Something, yes.
Yeah. So, that's a lot easier. Another thing, too, is it's a lot more across Linux distribution and desktop because, there's always a terminal, right? No matter what Linux distro, even a server that doesn't have a GUI has still got a terminal, a TTY. But nobody, right, has just a GUI really on Linux. And so, you can always get to the terminal. So it's a little, I would say, more easy to, get somebody in tech support wise, as you pointed out, just by doing that. So I think that's a good point.
And I think it's important to point out that even if you are using a desktop in Linux, it's running on a terminal. The desktop, depending on the distribution, is either on TTY1 or TTY6 or 7. And if you don't know what that means, well, that's something you need to look up. Actually, we'll talk about it probably a little bit later on. But if your desktop freezes up on a Linux machine, it's not really necessary to go diving for the power button. You can a lot of times use alternate control and the F keys to switch to another terminal that's not running your desktop. You can log in there, restart the machine, or troubleshoot the problem, one of the two. So that's very cool. You can't do that with other systems, boys and girls. That's just a Linux thing.
Very much indeed. And I mean, that's a thing that saved my bacon several times where the desktop freezes up and you just, Joe was saying.
You have some application on the desktop that's completely frozen the desktop itself, or your window manager crashes or something like that. And you can't do anything with it. If you still have keyboard control, you can get to that TTY and do a graceful shutdown and restart, or whatever you want to do with it. There's a lot of situations where that can come in very handy.
It can. And another thing I'll say too is if you have a situation where you mess up a system really bad, a lot of times the only thing you can get to is a TTY. I've done that where I've had to recover a system and I was able to get into the TTY and copy files out of it because I borked the system up, and it was no big deal because I could just copy the things I was working on out, reinstall, or in my case, I even fixed it a few times from a TTY when that's happened, where I just I want to figure out what it is that can be done to fix this. And a lot of times you can fix something, at least in my experience, in a TTY like that, but you may be spending a lot of time, and usually you need a second computer, like a laptop or a tablet or something, that you can look up the commands, because if you're like me, you probably don't memorize every single command to fix any specific problem in Linux, so you got to kind of look it up. But, that's something you can do.
Well, I can give you a very solid example. I was upgrading a machine a while back, and I have gone from you remember years ago they used to say, well, if you're going to upgrade your computer, you should blow everything off the drive, nuke and pave, start over, and reinstall. I don't do that anymore. Very rarely do I ever do that. I always do an in-place upgrade. And I was doing that with a machine that what I forgot to do was uninstall the video drivers before I started the upgrade. So when the upgrade booted up, I had no video at all. But I had enough where the TTY was working. So all I had to do was switch to a TTY, uninstall the video drivers, reinstall the new video drivers, restart the machine. Everything was back to where it should have been.
Yep.
And, because a lot of people will run into that, if I don't have video, if I screw up my video drivers, then my machine doesn't work at all anymore. No, it's not the case. It's just a matter of being able to if you can troubleshoot that problem, you can fix it.
Yeah, very true. And if you can fix it in the TTY, like I was saying, it could save your bacon. Now, I will say this. For me, I do often upgrade systems in place, but you can run into issues like Joe was saying. So my advice is still to nuke and pave, personally. It's, if you need something to work perfectly, because I've had systems where it's like, oh, it disables these repos and all these. Again, you can get it working, but we're talking about technical, sophisticated.
Because I find it fun. I like to sit there and go back and put all the repos back in.
Yeah.
Let it mess it up.
Yeah, and
I'll do it.
And I've done that kind of thing with mine too, because I don't care, right? I'll do the technical stuff like that, but I think it's safe to say, Joe, that talking to the average user, they'd probably rather just nuke and pave at that point, wouldn't they?
Well, there are some people that I have tried to work with through the years that you get to a certain point and then you just tell them, I think you would be better off just reinstalling. Because there's a lot of times, sometimes it's just too hard to walk through somebody fixing some really super complicated problem in other words, it would take you 4 or 5 hours to walk them through fixing it when they could probably reinstall in an hour, especially if they're just starting out anyway and they don't have any data on the system. It's, one of those kind of deals. So it depends.
Yeah, and I think that's a valid thing too, is you do get into situations with Linux, I've done it before, where you break a system so bad that even if you're technical, you just reach a certain point where it's like, you know what, I could spend 6 hours troubleshooting this or an hour reinstalling and moving the data back. And at a certain point, you just say, forget it. We're just going to redo it, Yeah.
I haven't had to do that in years, though. It's just because my workflows have become so predictable that I don't really do a lot to the computers to risk breaking them anymore. But I give myself a certain time limit on anything like that. I'll say, okay, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to poke at this, depending on what it is, 20 minutes, an hour. And after that, we're going to give up and walk away and start over, because sometimes it's just easier. And one of the nice things, if you're running like Time Shift, which is for Ubuntu, Linux Mint, Debian, I'm not exactly sure how many different distros are on it. Linux Mint ships it by default. It's actually part of the system. You have to add it to Ubuntu. It allows you to just very simply, either from a GUI or with a command in the terminal, to say, okay, just back me up to this restore point. And it doesn't touch your personal data, but it's kind of like restore points in Windows. And
Time
it just
Shift, right?
Puts you right back where you were.
Is it Time Shift? That's what you're talking about?
Yes, Time Shift.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Time Shift, I haven't had a lot of experience with it, but I know what you're talking about. I will say this from a workflow standpoint. I will say that for me, I don't really have any issues really with stability anymore, because again, like you were saying, you kind of have a workflow, you know what works, and you kind of just repeat it.
You're not going anywhere near, but even, an update can break the machine theoretically. I haven't seen one do it, and probably, I know about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a problem when we had a problem with the processors, that they had found some vulnerabilities in there, and there were some updates that came in hot and heavy to try and fix that. And the first update broke a lot of machines. And if it wasn't for something like Time Shift, that would have been a real pain. But you just, like I said, you can just roll back to it. And I think we're going to do that in another video at some point. Maybe we'll demonstrate different kinds of we're going to do a video about backups, because that's something that's near and dear to my heart, and I've been involved with writing a couple of backup type one snapshot piece of software called CYA. I was doing beta testing and troubleshooting for that. That was written by a fellow named Jeremy O'Connell. And the one that I use all the time is
it's
time
BU,
shifter.
right? I thought.
Well, BU is for data backup. We're talking about snapshot. There's two different things. That's two different distinctions there. Are you talking about a program that snapshots the operating system, or are you talking about backing up your files? And technically speaking, Time Shift will do your personal files as well. It's not very good at it, and I don't recommend it for a lot of reasons, but we won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, very much so. I think we should probably talk about Bash, considering that's what the show's about.
Well, we
too.
are talking about Bash because you can access it in Bash. It's a program that runs on the terminal. It's not just the little clicky GUI thing that you see. GUI, graphic user interface. One time somebody got so mad at me in a video because I called it a GUI. You would figure that everybody kind of knows what we're talking about. A GUI, graphic user interface.
Yeah, I mean, most people probably do, but maybe somebody that's completely new to computers wouldn't. My mom might not have known that at one point, right? So, people like that's kind of starting out, maybe you do, need to clarify. But I guess at a certain point, you can go so untechnical that it's too much for the technical. Like me and Joe was talking about this. Like, how do you do like, because I gather our audience is somewhere between new users and intermediates in this the Open Source Tonight channel. Well, how do we kind of make both audiences happy, right? You don't want to go too intermediate because then all the new users are like, I don't understand. But you also don't want to go so brand new that the intermediate users just think, I already know what a GUI is, Vince. Can you get on to the part that I'm actually going to learn anything?
Good stuff. When are you going to tell us something really cool?
Yeah. When are you going to show us something new? But anyways, talking about Bash, though, I would tell you, my thing about Bash is you can script anything you want with a Bash script. I built a Bash script to convert video files to ProRes with PCM audio, for example, which is a common format in the film and television business. If I needed to use something that required that, or I wanted to edit in it. And I also built a script that does the opposite. It takes a ProRes file, and it will convert it into an H.264 file, for example, or H.265 for archives.
For those who are completely new to the idea, let's describe what a script is.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So when you open up a terminal, you make the computer do things by typing in commands. Okay? The command line interpreter does not care where those commands come from. You can type them in manually, or you can feed those commands from another file. That would be a script where you have a list of commands that is fed to the shell, and the shell executes it. But when you're talking about Bash, it goes beyond that. Bash is actually more than something that runs commands to call up other programs. It is also a programming language in and of itself. So a Bash script, which could be anything from 2 lines that open up the email and open up, you can have just anything that you can do from a command line, you can do in a script pretty much. And they can be very simple 2 or 3 line things to do basic stuff, or it can be 10,000 lines of code that runs just like a program. And if you know how to do it, a lot of the commands that you run in Linux, if you go back and actually look at the code, they're Bash scripts.
Yep.
They're just they're just the way they're yes, they're in the binary directory, they're in one of the bin directories, it's all compiled. But if you decompile it, it's just a Bash script and it's running in Bash. Ton of stuff like that.
I'm not really sure what you mean by compile. Do you mean just that it's packaged in a deb package? Is that what you're referring to?
No, I mean that it's in a binary package. It's just it doesn't necessarily say sh at the end.
I see what you mean. Extensions removed. Yeah.
It's, shell script. It's just a package. But if you look in those packages a lot of times, and all you need is a plain text editor to see it, is sometimes what comes up on the screen is just a Bash script.
Yeah.
And you go, oh, somebody just wrote that,
Yeah, exactly.
You would think that it would be like machine language or assembly language. No, it's in readable language that you completely can understand. A lot more on your system is like that than you would think.
And Python programs, by the way, we do that too often on Linux, where you can do the same thing with a Bash script, and you can build really complicated stuff in Python. You can build a whole GUI desktop app, for example, even, and then put that singular Python file, that main Python file, or a symlink to it, which is another topic, into usr/bin. And again, you can open it up, right? You can cat it, use the cat command and open it up in your terminal, or you can use nano and look at it, or gedit or whatever. So it's interesting to look around and see just how much I did that several years ago. And in Ubuntu in particular, for example, when I've done that, you see a lot of Python scripts. And I'm assuming the reason is because Python's easy and it's flexible, and why not? But you do see a lot of Bash as well. And then, the exception to both of those is I do see occasionally compiled stuff too, of course, right? Some things are written in C and such. But regardless of that, I mean, you can do, the point being, a lot of things in a Bash script, right? It's pretty much like Joe's kind of gotten to. It's really a limitation of your imagination and your technical abilities. If you've got enough imagination and technical skills, I've seen some Bash scripts that they look like really, really, really cool, and I'm like, wow, it's doing all this different stuff. There's one that I seen, I think it was Bash. It was what it written in, and it was called Hollywood. And you literally would like put all these like different little boxes inside of the terminal and put all, like, basically it would look like a hacking scene out of a, like a TV show from the 90s or something.
And
of all
it was
this
just,
stuff.
visually thing. Yeah. I think we were talking the other night. I wrote one for a video where I don't remember specifically what it was for, but it was basically a script that ran for about 3 minutes. And it showed different things on the screen, and I called up a program called CalSay, which CalSay puts little characters in bubbles. And so that was all it was. It was pure fluff, and it would scroll ASCII art pictures on the screen and things like that. You can do a lot of really wild stuff with it. But I mean, most people, up to this point are going, well, I don't understand. It can be super simple. It could be like 2 lines. If it's anything that you find yourself doing on a regular basis, you can put those 2 lines in a file, put a shebang on top of it, and save it with the right privileges, and it becomes a script. And then, in other words, instead of typing the 3 commands that you would type to do that, you type 1. So you can see how that can become very, very, very powerful, because a script can call a script.
Yep.
Because it's just another program.
Exactly. So you can really, like Joe was getting to, you can really automate, like, pretty much, it's really limitations of the mind and everything. You can automate anything, and that's something I've done before too, is call other scripts, by the way, from in a script. So I've even built like 2 scripts and then called them from one to the other, depending on what I needed. So you can get really advanced. There's one Bash script that I built for a client that will remain nameless that installs a bunch of their products in Linux. And that thing is about, I think it's 800, 900 lines now, because it is going through and building all kinds of complicated stuff, making sure it's the right version of Linux, making sure it's the right dependencies. Like, you can really, oh, are you on x86? Oh, no, you're not. You're on ARM. Well, we don't support that unless it's on a Raspberry Pi. Oh, you're on a Raspberry Pi. Well, we also support that. We'll do the install, and so forth. So you can really, you can get into the weeds of technical stuff to where, again, you can have an 800, 1,000 line program that is pure Bash.
Oh, yeah, you can write in Bash, but the thing is that what you're talking about is testing, and where you're looking to find out, you're trying to anticipate the environment and the user for what you're writing. And that would be if you're writing for general production people to use every day that you don't know who they are. If you're writing your own stuff, you can skip a lot of that crap because you already know how your system works. And I have a bunch of scripts on GitHub that are meant for general consumption, and then I have a whole bunch of scripts that I use on my own network at home just to do stupid things. Like I have a script that's probably 3 lines long that what it does is it will update Thunderbird, the mail client. The whole profile will update from one machine to the next, and the reason why I do that is because there used to be a little plugin that you could get for Thunderbird that worked with Google that would sync all of your contacts, Well, that quit working. So I was able to get Thunderbird to automatically bring in addresses from people who send me things, so I have it on hand. But I wasn't able to sync it across machines easily, so I sync it myself. See what I'm saying? And that's, like I said, it's a 2 or 3 line little script. It's very tiny. It's very powerful, because that means when I sit down at another machine and I want to email somebody like Vince, well, if that machine hadn't had its address book updated since then I wouldn't be able to do it. And I'd be like, oh, I'd have to go get on another machine, which is silly. It shouldn't be that way at all, because it should all sync up. And so that prevents that from happening. My whole network is redundant. I have lots of different accounts on all the machines in the house. So if one of them explodes and I still have to get work done, all I got to do is walk to another machine and sit down, and everything is already synced up, because I have all these scripts doing that. So on my main workstation, I can actually just broadcast a whole bunch of settings and files and everything that way. It's all done through Bash.
And I mean, you can do some really interesting stuff with syncing too, like that, because programs like that, they usually are storing in a dot directory in your home directory, and you could build a bash script that just copies that whole directory. I've done that before, where I needed, whatever program settings to copy to 2 computers, and you can really get complicated with that. I've done some interesting things with that. One thing I did a while back, I had a system I was developing that needed a very specific environment to run in, a program I was building on top of. And so what I did is I'd make a change to the code, and then I had a bash script that would automatically update the code on that box. It would just log into it, shoot that data up to it, and then log itself back out. And it would do it seamlessly. I had SSH keys, so I didn't have to type a password, and it just... You walk away, and it comes back.
Yeah, that's the next thing that we need to mention is, because we're really not getting into the nuts and bolts of Bash or scripting, because there's so much out there that is really good. There's a lot of good content on the web that will teach you how to do that. What we're trying to do is talk to you why you should learn to do it. And probably the most powerful tool in Linux, besides Bash itself, is SSH. And that is the ability to, across a network, across the internet, get into other machines and exchange data back and forth. And through SSH, you can actually run applications on other machines that look like they're running locally on your machine. And we're talking, you can do GUIs. It's called X forwarding. We were talking about X2Go. There's all kinds of different ways to make that work. And it just, so you learn a little bit about Bash. Next thing you need to learn about is SSH.
SSH is wonderful. I mean, I can't say enough good things about SSH. I wish that SSH would send me millions of dollars so I'd have another reason to talk about them nice. I'm just saying you can send it over. But I'm kidding. But seriously, the SSH you can do, like Joe was saying, X forwarding. The biggest thing I love to do is I'm a big fan of copying stuff over the network. So you can use secure copy or SFH. What is it? The SSH file system, I think is what those letters stand for, isn't it, Joe?
SSHFS.
Yeah. But you can literally have whole systems where you're copying data around like that and make it very useful. You can use
SSHFS at boot time to where you have a machine that doesn't have any storage on it, but can access a file server on the network through SSHFS, and that comes up at boot time, and it's on, and it hooks itself up. So let me give you a good example. Years and years ago, I used to have this little tiny HP netbook. It was a toy. It really was. It had 32 gigabytes of storage on it, and it was and I could get Linux to run on it. But the one thing I couldn't do is, because it only had 32 gigabytes of storage, was to put any real files on it. So if I wanted to play music on this machine from my own music, I didn't have to set up some grandiose media server or anything. All I had this thing do is when you booted it up, it would automatically log into a file server on the network. And where the music folder was, I used SSHFS to make a music folder on my file server that had all the tunes in it. It showed up there on this machine, and it didn't know the difference. So that when you would launch, I think I was using Rhythmbox or Banshee or whatever I was into at the time to play music, It just saw the files were there and it kept playing it. It was pulling them down through the network and didn't even know it. And that's not with any fancy tools. We're not talking about any, hard setup, or you've got to install something, or you've got to learn how to use something. SSHFS is one package. And that's one of the things I love about Linux is you can accomplish a lot in Linux with stuff that's either already installed, or we're talking about installing one extra package. Like one of my favorite SSH programs is ancient. It's called SFTP, Secure File Transfer Protocol. And it works like the old FTP protocol that you would run in a terminal, 30, 40 years ago. It's the same commands, but it does it over SSH. So it establishes a connection with another machine, and you're in there, and you have this completely different little environment that you're working on. You can grab the files, you can move files back and forth. It's very powerful, and it's tiny. And you only have to learn how, like 5 commands. And this thing, you can move one file, or you can move however much data you want to move over the network. Such a neat tool.
Yeah, and SFTP is wonderful. I will tell you that. Now, that being said, as far as SSH goes, there's a lot of things you can do. I'll tell you one thing I found pretty good use in is sometimes you just need one thing from a system, and you just need to just really quickly do it automatically. So you could build a bash script, for example, with the SSH command and an SSH server on your different computers. And I've done this, and then you can have that script log into each of them, run one command you give it as whatever user you want with a key, then it logs out, and you can even log that output. So that if you needed to check and see, for example, what the file system resources of every computer in your network is, you could do like df space -h and echo that back out to each of your systems, right, on one system.
I got one for you. How about this? You want to talk about super easy scripting? Write your command, set variables, do a for loop to go through all of the machines on the network, run the same command on each one, look at the exit code before it logs out, and then continue to do it, and also it'll be able to stop. You could do that in about 10 lines of code. What you were describing.
Yeah, exactly. And the code that I did it with was about, I think, 8 to 10 lines, I think, something in that neighborhood. So.
Right, because the command's not going to change. So you set variables in the command, and then you go through that. But we're getting a little ahead there. Yeah. But yeah, once you get an idea of what the shell is, and you think it's like when you first come into it and you're first looking at it, and this was true for me, was that, oh God, this is complicated and there's too much to learn, and I'll never understand this. It's really kind of funny because as you start learning, there's a point that comes where you're like, you get to the bottom of the toy box. You've seen all the toys. You know what you have to work with. And at that point, that's when the little bell goes off in the back of your head that makes you go, oh my God, the combinations are endless. I can do anything with this that I need to do. And automate it and walk away. Just let it do it. Yeah.
The automation part is what I really am into, is just the fact that you can just automate everything. I want all the things automated, so where I don't have to constantly do the same thing over and over. That is something I don't want to do. But, far as...
No, go on. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, as far as like the variable thing goes, I just thought I'd clarify for the maybe the new users, the less technical users in our audience here today. What a variable is you can think of it like a bucket that is storing data. So for example, you could have a variable named name, right? And it could be my name, so Vincent. And then if you was to echo that variable back out with the $sign in front of it, you'd get Vincent, if that's what you set it to. And so you can do some really powerful stuff with bash.
A variable is nothing more than a way to take a piece of information, a string of text, and hold it in memory.
That's exactly what it is.
That's all it is.
And so it allows you to store that for later use. And there's a bunch of default variables in Bash as well that you get. For example, one I often use is the user variable, all capital user, because that gives you the person's username. And you often need that for certain tasks that you might be doing. Yes. So it helps you with that.
Yeah, the backup programs that I write use variables heavily and rely on shell variables like you were talking about. Because and what I like to do when I write them, and this is for people that are probably a little more advanced, is I will usually take a shell variable, and if I'm going to be using it, I'll pull it in as a local variable. and set that within the program itself. There's a lot of neat things that you can do that way, especially if the shell variable is going to change, and you can launch more shells to get you can always check the variables. So yeah, that's also how you would, that's a variable that's set every time a program exits. There's an exit variable, and it goes to check that to see, basically a 0 means that if it's set to 0, that means that the program exited properly. If it's anything else but a 0, if it's a 1, that means that your exit code means there was an error. Very powerful. You can use that to just check things and make sure that everything's working the way and your flow and all that other stuff. So yeah, once you get those little things in your head, it's just a matter of how it's all put together.
And yeah, you can use bash scripts. Inside of those, you can use an if statement, which will let you compare variables against something. So you could make sure, like Joe was saying, hey, did this program's exit code, was it a 1
right,
or a 2 or something else? Because some programs I've worked with, they actually give you a specific number other than 0 for a specific error. So if you're looking for an error that you want to process special, you could look for a 5 or a 10. Or if you just need to know it's an error, is it not 0? Well, then it's an error.
Yeah. Some programs are set in such a way that they don't just like put a 1, that is a way of doing an error code, where what that does is it basically tells anybody who's decoding what's going. You can look in that variable that we were talking about. You can look in that variable and make sure that it'll tell you exactly what the problem was with the program. That's what I was trying to say. And that depends. I mean, that's really complicated programs that have that. And usually you would look in the documentation and they would have a list of those numbers and you would know what the error number was and all that stuff. But a lot of people don't use that. It's pretty far and few between, but when you come across it, it's always very nice because it lets you know exactly what's going on.
Yeah, that's something I know I should use more often. But a lot of the scripts I write are for me.
I know.
And I am Mr. Well, if it's just for me, do I really even need to error check any of this? I'll just do it, and if it breaks, I'll know it's broke. So I don't really care about it so much for me. But if it's something production, then that's where you really, like Joe was talking about, that's where you put the error code in to check if there is error codes. Because again, if it's just you running it, you can read, you can see if there's a problem, even if you're not specifically tracking it, right? If the program doesn't do what you want, well, then something broke. Like with FFmpeg, for example, if I am specifically checking for an exit code, well, it prints stuff on the screen if I'm running it. And on top of that, if it's going to output a video file, let's say, and I don't see the video file there, obviously it's broke, So
obviously it didn't work. Yeah. I like to write error messages, though. It's kind of a part of the fun for me, especially to try and write helpful error messages, not just something that leads somebody to a brick wall and go, sorry, it didn't work, which is what a lot of developers do because they don't care. It's like it's an afterthought. Oh, I'll just put an error message in here.
The errors are so much of an afterthought, I think, for everybody. Well, maybe not everybody, but at least for the programmers I've talked to, and I know for me, it's just like, we're not thinking about it. We're just trying to get the daggone thing to work. I mean, let's be honest. That's what 9 times out of 10, that's where you're at is, I just need this script to do this one thing and I've got to get it working because I need it today. That's what it is. Yeah. And then you worry about the errors later.
If you've identified the error, though, and if it's to the point where you have set a code for it and you know that it's going to do that and it's going to exit with an error, take the time to write. You can echo as much text as you like out of there. It doesn't slow anything down. Take the time to write a helpful error message. By the way, I don't know if you guys can hear this in the back. I don't know if you guys can hear this in the background, but you might be hearing this little sound like a little bell. Because I'm actually sitting here recording this, my cat has decided that his little ball toy is the most exciting thing on the planet, and he's knocking it around. He's done it at least 4 times. Now he's running around it. So my apologies. I might put that up next time.
Oh, don't worry. I like you said in the last thing we did, that if you put a cat in the video, we'll get more views on it. So,
Well, if he'd come over here, I'd put him in the video, but he's all the way across the room, and I'm not going to get up and go get him. So
yeah, what we need to do when the budget gets bigger, we'll have the camera crew, we'll throw a camera on somebody's shoulder and say, hey, can you run over here and get a shot of that real quick? Yeah, we need the cat cam, patent pending. The patent pending cat cam and open source tonight technology that we invented. Anyway, but yeah, no, you could do some pretty interesting things with it for sure. It's interesting when it comes to Bash because it's really like one of these rabbit hole topics. I could talk about Bash for 6 hours. I think Joe could do it too.
It goes on and on forever. And like I said, it's one of those things that, yes, you do have to invest some time in it to learn, but once you start down that, it's so interesting. You'll never learn it all, number one. There's always somebody who knows something you don't. And the other thing about it is just that you get to a point where your mind goes, really the options with this are totally endless. You can run the world with Bash. You can do, and there is a point at which, and they'll tell you in every book that I've ever read on the subject, they say there is a point where you should probably not think of programming a Bash script to do something. At some point, it becomes a program, where now you're going to start moving into more complicated languages like C and Python and Rust and all these other ones that you hear about, because they are
they're more optimized for those more complicated tasks and
for that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, Python is one of those things. There's one Bash script, that one that's 800 lines, where I honestly wish it was already Bash and I was updating it, but there's a part of me that's like, man, kind of wish we'd done this in Python, because it's getting to the point where I feel like we might have been able to do a better job with this product if it had been Python from the start. But once you start with something legacy, it's kind of hard to convert something, right? So it's like, well, we're kind of stuck with it.
There's one thing to keep in mind, though. There's one thing to keep in mind, and that is, and I always try and keep this in mind because I'm very old school. I started learning about this back in the 90s, okay? And at that point, everybody said, make sure that you're compatible with SH, because Bash wasn't necessarily compatible with SH in 1998. It is now. As a matter of fact, SH, by the way, is the shell. That's the old Unix shell. Some programs in Linux, some scripts call on it. It's usually the SH in your bin directory these days is usually nothing but a link to Bash. But in the old days, it used to be the other way around. Bash was the option. And so there's this thing called SH compatibility. And along those lines, you're talking about writing in Python, you're talking about writing in some other language. And if you're not willing to compile something into its own binary, if you are ever in a server or an embedded device where the only thing you have is BusyBox, which isn't even a full Bash environment,
you're
whatever
in bad
you write
shape.
has to be SH compatible or it won't run.
Exactly, yeah. And
because you're not going to have access to the Python 3 interpreter. It's not going to be there. See, it's not going to be able, because a Python program is like a Bash script in it, up at the top. It calls for Python. You have the shebang at the top, and it calls for whatever this thing is written in. Okay, you're going to have SH, which these days is linked to Bash almost directly, but you may not have Python. So that's really where you differentiate. Are you trying to write something that's going to be totally portable across every Unix-like system? If so, keep it simple and what else?
And write it in a SH compatible format.
Python. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was going to say, but you would want to write it in that scenario. I've always heard it with the SH shell as a shebang too, just in case, rather than Bash, right? Because what if it doesn't have Bash? Have you heard about that? That's something I've seen some talk about.
Run that by me again.
Okay, so I've heard before from people that may or may not know what they're talking about, obviously, which is why I want to ask you, is I've heard that if a system doesn't have Bash, you need to, if you want real cross compatibility, not only you want it to be SH compatible, but you want to use an SH shebang line instead of Bash.
Yeah, you can do that, and there's very little difference between the two. But what I write is whatever I have published on GitHub is very specific to 3 different Linux operating systems. I don't expect anything that I've written to run on anything else. If you can port it over there, if you can get it over there, that's great. I had a guy who there was a stupid script. There's one script I've written that's insanely popular. It's called Up. It's an update script mainly for Ubuntu, but it works on Linux Mint as well. It'll work on Debian too. And it's just update commands. It's just different versions of, there's different functions in the script that have different versions of the update commands that do different things. And the way you activate them is when you put the command in, you'll put in up, and then you'll put in -- remove, which means that it'll remove orphaned packages, let's say. And it's the whole point of it was to be a teaching exercise to teach functions. I never really expected anybody to use it. Well, I shared it. People love it. And it's been ported to BSD. It's been ported to any Arch-based Linux like Manjaro. There's a guy who maintains a fork of that that's specifically for Arch Linux and has all the different syncs that Arch Linux has and the different ways that you can sync things. But it's just, and it works the same way. So that was crazy. But that particular program, now I can't remember why I brought it up. Why did I bring that up?
Live video at its finest.
Like I was saying, I have no idea how I got down that rabbit hole. But the point that I was trying to make is that when I write something, I publish right up top. This works in Ubuntu. This works in Linux Mint. It may work in other operating systems that are based on Ubuntu, and it may work for you in Debian-based systems. Have fun.
Yeah, it's your problem, right? No warranty, no support. So,
no
again, you can
guarantee whatsoever that this should even, nobody should ever use this at all. Believe me, if you're going to put scripts on GitHub, at the bottom of that script, you should be in text. There, I have a disclaimer message in there that basically says that this is complete garbage and there's no guarantee or warranty of any kind. And if you bork up your world and lose all your data, don't sue me for $1 million because I warned you.
Not to mention, you may not even have $1 million. I know I don't. So
I don't.
But I still don't want you to sue me, though. For the record, just saying that's not an invitation. But that being said, yeah, very much so. You got to put that disclaimer in there. And I mean, realistically, if you put a GPL or an MIT on it, it normally states, if memory serves, like no official warranty and such on it anyway, don't it?
Well, they do, but a lot of people don't go and read the GPL either. So I mean, I put it in the script as well. I put it. There is a place in the script where, like I said, I got very fascinated with the structure of scripts, and so mine have a lot of things that I think a lot of people would look at and go, "Why did he do that?" And it was just because I think it's cool, and it's like I said, the up script, which is insanely simple. And it was the whole point of it was I wanted to do a video where I was teaching people who were scripting how to use functions, how to set up functions, how to call functions, how to make it so that, when you execute it, it tests for things and it pulls up the right function. That's all I wanted to do. And people actually use the damn thing, which is beyond me.
Wow. There you go. But I mean, I will say that like, again, that's one of the nice things about open source is you do get the ability to get that use case going out there where somebody will use your thing. I mean, I get stuff. I'm an official maintainer of Open Broadcaster's Player, for example, and full disclosure for everybody, I do get paid by them to do a lot of work for them. So just saying, if I say anything nice about them, doesn't automatically mean that it's a pure. They ain't paying me to say this, but I'm just saying if they want to put an ad on the show, give me a call.
You get 50 cents or $1 here and there. I mean, come on, don't make too big a deal out of it.
I mean, if not a millionaire off it, no. But anyway, my point being is that on the Player, I get questions all the time from all over the place about that thing because it's open source and anybody can run it, and you get some really interesting head scratchers every once in a while. Like, wait, what? You can do that with it?
That's exactly what I was going to say. You can post something. And you can share a script and people will go get it. And then you learn more about your script because they're using it in other environments. And I cannot tell you, I used to have the first thing when I got through learning that I did was this gargantuan script called XBT, which was external backup tool, because I have a thing about backups. And this thing had menus in it, and it was like when it ran, there was a menu on the screen, and you would push a button, and it would take off. And this thing was really designed to be like a GUI running in a terminal. And so when I published that, people actually went out and used it, and I started learning so much about how people were using this particular script. And I had I'd hit upon an idea that just didn't exist. Was the idea to do a snapshot of your home directory, okay? And the idea is that every time that you would fire this thing off, it would go in and change that. It was just super simple backup program. But the point I'm trying to make is that I learned more from what people were doing with it. And then I got to the point where I learned so much from the people that I wanted to rewrite it. So I actually retired it and came up with a new program altogether called BU, backup, or backup USB, either way. And that program took a lot from XBT, but then took a lot of the suggestions from people and put it in there. So that was a hell of an experience.
Yeah, you optimized based on what people was seeing in the field and everything, and that's a great power of open source, really.
And there was so much change that I had gotten up to XBT version 3, and there was so much change that I thought I can't even go to 4 because it's not the next program is going to be completely different. So I just retired it. I said, look, it works. If you want to use it, fine. I'm not updating it anymore, but I would suggest that you come over here and use this one, and started doing the other thing. And it's a hell of an experience.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, just maintaining any open source thing in any capacity is an interesting experience because, you're always thinking, at least I am, about the stability factor because you don't want to push something that's going to break somebody's box. And that is the worst call. I've gotten them a few times over the years where it's like, this broke something, buddy. And I mean, actual phone calls, because, some of these people have my number. And, when they do that, you think, oh, man, what's going on? And usually it's something really minor. And we had a situation recently on a repo I seen that I had partial control over, that somebody pushed something and they realized it broke something and then they asked me to revert it. And, thankfully they did, right? It's always good to revert things when you make a mistake. But that's one thing that I like about Git and open source is you do have the ability to revert things. And you do have those eyes on the code that's looking at, well, what is that latest commit that Vincent did? Did it break anything? Oh, I think it did. Let me put an issue in on GitHub and let him know that so he can figure out what broke.
Yeah,
right?
I don't do it. I got to a place where I had written all the tools that I needed and I used them. And so I haven't really been very involved with that for like at least maybe a couple of years now. And so I don't get too much feedback on it anymore, but for a period of time there, especially when it was in hot development there, just like you said, it's like you think you've got it right. And then somebody comes along and they found something and you go, oh, and you just roll that right back in. That's what makes open source a beautiful thing. It's very organic. And I mean, we could do a whole just sit down and talk about the difference between proprietary and open source. We could. And by the way, free plug for a video in the description is Proprietary Software Evil, a video I made like a year ago. I'm just saying, got to stick in a plug. Maybe you might want to look and see if we got any questions at this point. We've been rambling on for quite some time.
I actually did ask people in the chat. We've had people hop in and out of the show during pretty much the whole broadcast, but unfortunately nobody seems to have any questions. I specifically put a thing in the chat saying, anybody got any questions? Me and Joe will answer them, right? And we've yet to get questions. So, speak now, everybody, please. Let us know a question. There was one question I got while we were waiting on it, though, Joe, that you might have an answer for. So I did a video a while back on auto start programs. You know how you can do in your home directory .config/auto start / insert program name or whatever .desktop, let's say, and then you put in the right stuff in there and you can make a terminal or a desktop GUI app auto launch. Well, we had a comment on a video I did about that where they couldn't get a very specific program to work, and I really don't know why. I couldn't replicate it, but I was wondering if you had any weird thing that maybe you have to do for this specific program. It was like top, like an HTOP, but it was like this other one. Let me just pull the comment up and I'll read it to everybody so everybody knows what I'm talking about. And all right, let's see here. Here it is. So it's called BPY Top is what it's called. That's the program. And the comment says here, they say they appreciate my response because I asked them, if they'd done a few things, and those things was to make sure it's in the right directory, the right path is what's being put, right? So you're running the right executable. They checked that. I asked them if they could paste their .desktop file in the comments, and they did that as well, so we could see if there was anything that stood out. I didn't see anything. But anyway, they said they appreciate my response. Yeah, tried all of that, they said. They said that if they double-click on the file, and it will run, and the program opens. So if they put it like on their desktop or something, but it doesn't work. Even if they write a bash script, they said, and try calling it still doesn't work. Now, I don't know why that's the case, what's going on there, but I will say this. One thing that they did bring up that I thought was interesting was they did bring up the fact that they also tried putting a cron tab on reboot. And that, folks, just let me say, this user, I assume, didn't know that won't work to open a GUI app. Right, you need something that is going to be actually on the desktop level, which is why you would use the .desktop file. And obviously they were trying it that way too, so they were probably just reaching at straws. But I just thought I'd clarify that as a teaching moment, because not everybody knows. I didn't know that years ago either, right? You learn. But I actually am looking at their .desktop file now, and you know what I am noticing here? They said that they referenced the I've tried using the full path /bin. Oh no, they have. Okay. So I was going to say they didn't put that, but yeah. So you should put your full path. You should put your full path in the .desktop file, which in the one they copied they didn't. Huh?
Does it run in a terminal?
It does, and they've got terminal equal true on it as they're supposed to, right?
Okay, so it's set to do that, right?
Yeah, it is. It's got terminal equal true.
That if this is the case, this sounds to me, and I am really just guessing without looking at it, because I don't know the program, that what you're talking about there is a permissions issue. Because there's some pretty weird permissions on some programs, and it may be that it has to access a part of the environment that for some reason can't be done automatically, but a double click will do. Now, why that is, I couldn't be able to tell you, but I have heard of such things happening. So it would really depend on looking at the program itself and seeing how it launched, and seeing if you could launch it from a script if you can, because when you do that, what you're doing is it's launching it in the shell that's running the desktop and putting it in the background. That's how it works. How your desktop deals with what it runs is essentially like if you're in a terminal. If you're in a terminal, you can type in Firefox, for instance, okay? Put a space, put an ampersand. And what that will tell the terminal to do is run this program and put it in the background. And you can work on the program, and you can use that exact same terminal now to type in other commands, because Linux is multitasking even if it's not running in a GUI. That's how you access that, okay? So it may have something to do with it not liking the idea of being placed in the background. I know for a fact that HTOP doesn't like to be, that's another top type program, doesn't like to be placed in the background. If you try and background HTOP, it'll just crash the program. It doesn't run at all.
So, Joe, let me just stop you here. It may have done it that way in the past, but I did a video and I showed how to do HTOP with the .desktop, and it worked on the first try. So I guess they fixed
HTOP
it or something.
Work with .desktop. It will work. It's the same thing, but if you try and do it manually, it'll crash it.
Oh.
So it may be. I'm not saying that HTOP is definitely.
So you could run it in HTOP. So you could run a .desktop to
click.
So you could run a .desktop.
It's also set up to do that.
Yeah. So but you could run a .desktop. I mean, I did it. So in theory, it should be where you have HTOP. I did it on video. You all can go check out the video.
Well, HTOP is designed to do that.
Yeah.
But it may be. But if you take HTOP and you fire it off, if you get try and put HTOP in the background and it'll crash it.
Yeah, but
if
you're talking about
it'll crash it.
Yeah, but you're talking explicitly about putting
it in it may be a situation where it's trying to launch it, and then it tries to put it in the background and it crashes the program. Whereas with HTOP, it's designed to be fired off that way.
Okay, so HTOP isn't got a problem because they're designed to handle it, but some
Right.
programs aren't. So this is really
When
just
you install HTOP, you go get HTOP sudo apt install HTOP. It will put a in your menu. It's going to put a click, a desktop file.
well, I mean,
launcher.
It will, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about I made a separate file in the auto start directory, and it worked fine when it auto started. That's what we're talking about here. So I mean, that worked for me. Now I don't really know for sure how the function.
Work then.
All I did was do the standard config. I put terminal true and put it in the right path and everything. Rebooted the computer and it worked.
It didn't work.
Huh?
No, you're talking about HTOP?
Yes, HTOP. Yeah,
well, HTOP is designed to run that way, so I have no problem with it working.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying.
We're talking about if you're in a terminal, try it. Go into a terminal.
I know you put the ampersand at the end. That's what you're saying you can't do. Right, you can't background it.
So what I'm
in
thinking
that sense
is maybe this other program is acting the same way for some reason. I don't know.
It could be.
I'm guessing.
It could be. That's a good question. We don't have a good answer, unfortunately. It sounds like, but that's probably the closest we're going to get, I guess, to a good answer. Because I honestly don't know. I tried everything with the. I tried everything I could do with the commenter. Trying to help them, and I meant to post them a link to the show so they could find it. I hope you all found it. Because I forgot to post the link and I just noticed that the show is almost over. So, but I'll update that comment by replying to it with the video link later. But anyway, regardless of that, I think that's pretty much our show, Joe. I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on here before we kind of
questions. See if anybody else has anything to say. I don't want to dump on anybody.
Oh, of course, yeah. So we don't have any questions, unfortunately. I already checked. I'm looking right now at them. But we do have a comment. I will go ahead and read it on the air. Michael says, I'm good, thanks. I love Bash, by the way. Well, I'm glad you love Bash, because, I mean, it's Bash. Who doesn't love Bash? Anyway, someone's going to come in here and say they love Bash now. But, I like it. But anyway, yeah, that's all we got on comments today, Joe. The chat was not very chatty. So, but anyway, hey, at least we got something. Thanks, everybody, for coming back to the first episode of Open Source Tonight, the first ever live taping of Open Source Tonight, if memory serves, and definitely the first one that's been released in a long, long time. We plan on doing these generally, weather permitting and all those fun things, power not going out, the internet going out, etc. Every week, as far as I'm aware. We'll probably take off Christmas week and such like that, holidays, but excluding like exception weeks, probably every Friday otherwise at about 8 o'clock Eastern time, about 1 a.m. UTC. Come in and tune in to us watch us doing the show live. Joe, where can they find you at online if they want to check you out?
The best way to find me these days is just to type in Joe Collins Linux in Google and look for my YouTube channel. If you do those 3 words, my YouTube channel will be the first thing that pops up.
And it generally is when I search it. In addition to that, we will put a link in the description to the channel as well if somebody can't find it, though.
Yeah. And for those of you who remember Easy Linux, that's still up and running, easylinux.com, but there's not much going on over there, so I'm not real worried about it. I don't know how much longer that particular webpage is actually going to be up and running. But, yeah, if you want to see my videos, I have a lot of Bash content. I have especially look for a video called Beginner's Guide to the Bash Terminal. And that one is very popular. And essentially, I give you all the basics that you need in about an hour. So
it's really
good
video.
Place to start.
Yeah, it's a great video. I learned a lot of stuff from it, and I already knew Bash pretty good when I watched the whole thing. So you'll probably pick up something.
Which is really interesting. It's funny, and that video has I looked at it the other day, and it's got, I think it's 2 million and something views now, which is amazing, right? That many people want to learn about Bash. But if I had known that was going to be that big of a video, I would have done a better job. I didn't know, man. I just thought it was going to be the next video in line, and it got huge. But
that's the funny thing about YouTube and videos in general. I've noticed is the videos I care so much about, no one watches. Right? I've put blood, sweat, and tears into certain things, and I thought, man, this is the greatest video in the history of the universe. And then, like I said, I do something in an afternoon just for fun, which was that thing. And like I said, I would have done a better job. It would have been like, oh, I just sat there and took my notes and sat down and ripped through it, and people love it. Yeah, exactly.
So.
I mean, I've done some videos like that too. I mean, the video that took off just recently was shot right out there on the outside of this window y'all can't see in the live video feed. And that video's got over 1,000 views. And most of that was in the first week. And I'm like, what? That never happens on a video. And it was the most simple video. All I did was I walked out there, clapped my hands for audio sync, had my mic recording, the camera recording.
What were you talking about?
All I did was talk about how great Linux was for like 10 minutes. But apparently that was the perfect video for everybody to watch because they just... I guess the world I didn't know it wanted to know what I thought about Linux. I thought it was obvious.
Well, it would take me more than 10 minutes to tell you what all the things I like about Linux.
For the record, it was
cool.
For the record, it was actually the second video on the same topic. I did another one about a year before that, and I called it "More Great Reasons Why Linux Are Great" or something like that. But honestly, that video was still a drop in the bucket. Like it's like the end credits of a movie if I actually listed everything on screen. Maybe we should just do a video that's like 10 minutes long. Just every reason why Vincent likes Linux. Just read through them all, and then you can just watch the video again, to really absorb the fact that you missed something randomly. But yeah, everybody, I thank you all for watching Open Source tonight. And, who knows? Maybe Joe... Oh, there he goes. He's waving at the camera. Yay! Joe Collins, everybody. Right here on Open Source Tonight. I'm Vincent Maggard, and you can find me online as well. VincentMaggard.com is my website if you want to check me out. If you want to hire me for software development, you can visit my GitHub page and reach out to me there, or you can visit my development site, vincentmaggard.dev, that doesn't actually do anything anymore, but you can check it out anyway. Don't forget, everybody, to... subscribe to the podcast. This will be a podcast episode, so if you are one of these people that don't like YouTube and wants to have everything all open, well, there's a web server running Linux right now that's got that RSS feed on it, and don't worry, in just a few hours, this audio version of this show will be up for those listeners that want to do that. It will be available on Spotify, iTunes, all the podcast places that you find podcasts. I guess it's not called iTunes anymore. It's called Apple Podcasts or whatever they're calling it now. But anyway, thanks everybody for watching. We appreciate your viewership here at Open Source Tonight. I'm going to mute Joe's audio and then wave goodbye. Goodbye, everybody. The Joe Collins is waving goodbye too. All right, everybody. See y'all again very soon. Goodbye, everybody. And we're clear. I mean, my mic's not, but...